There's a certain kind of silence at a wedding that cuts deeper than tears. It's the silence of 40 empty chairs, all reserved for the bride's family. My name is Waverly Ashford. I'm 33 years old, and I've spent my career as a labor and delivery nurse, helping bring hundreds of babies into the world. People at the hospital know me as the calm one, the nurse who never panics, no matter how chaotic the room becomes. When everyone else is losing their heads, I keep mine. But nothing in my career prepared me for the moment I looked across my own wedding ceremony and realized not a single member of my family had come. 40 white chairs stood perfectly arranged on my side of the aisle. 40 invitations. 40 names. Not one occupied seat. At first, I thought the empty chairs were the worst part of my story. I was wrong, because 2 weeks later, hidden beneath the spare tire inside my mother's car, I discovered something that shattered everything I believed about my family. And when my father finally saw the proof with his own eyes, it destroyed a 40-year marriage in a single afternoon. But before I tell you how that happened, you need to understand how I became the woman who kept forgiving people who never deserved another chance. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally find their voice, and those who spent years being overlooked discover that the truth has a way of catching up with everyone. If you've ever loved people who constantly chose someone else over you, if you've ever questioned your own worth because of the family you were born into, then you're not alone. Take a moment to tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe because today's story is one you'll remember long after it's over. Everyone at the hospital calls me dependable. When a baby's heartbeat suddenly drops, when terrified parents begin to panic, when doctors start shouting orders, I'm the person who stays calm enough to think clearly. I document everything, every medication, every conversation, every minute. My husband, Daniel, likes to joke that I probably keep receipts for groceries I'll never return. He's right, because I learned something very young. When people constantly rewrite history, the truth only survives if someone keeps records. Back then, though, I thought I kept records because I was organized. I didn't realize I was preparing for the day I'd have to prove my own mother had spent decades rewriting my life growing up. I was always the dependable child. If my grandmother needed someone to drive her to dialysis, my mother called me. If a pipe burst at my parents' house in the middle of the night, she called me. Never my younger brother, Cole. Always me. For years, I convinced myself that being the reliable one meant I was loved. I mistook responsibility for affection. I believed that if my mother depended on me enough, eventually she'd choose me. To that day never came the spring before our wedding. Daniel proposed on the back porch of the little house we'd just bought together. He pulled out a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, a ring his mother had quietly kept inside an old coffee can for more than 20 years, waiting for the right woman to wear it. I didn't even let him finish the question. I said yes through tears. We planned a simple June wedding at a beautiful barn surrounded by orchards. Nothing extravagant, just family, close friends, good food, and love. More than anything else, I wanted one picture, just one. My mother sitting proudly in the front row, wiping away tears while watching her daughter get married. I had spent 33 years making excuses for her. Surely she could give me one Saturday. I reserved 4 seats in the very front row just for my parents and my brother. I never imagined those chairs would become the most painful photograph of my entire life. Because hope can survive years of disappointment until someone decides to use that hope against you. And that's exactly what someone in my family had already planned to do. Looking back now, I can finally admit something I refused to see for most of my life. The wedding wasn't the beginning of my heartbreak. It was simply the first time my mother's choices became impossible to hide. For 33 years, I had survived on hope. Hope that one day she would choose me. Hope that one day she would be proud of me. Hope that one day I would matter just as much as my brother. I had no idea that hope was the very thing she counted on. A few weeks after Daniel proposed, I drove to my parents' house with a box of freshly printed wedding invitations sitting on the passenger seat. I could have mailed every one of them myself. Instead, I wanted to do something that felt like family. I wanted my mother to be part of the process. When she opened the front door, she was wearing gardening gloves, dirt still clinging to her sleeves. She barely looked at the invitation in my hand. I wanted you to have this first, I said with a smile. Our wedding is June 14th. I really hope you'll be there. For just a second, she stared at the cream-colored envelope. Then she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the polite smile people wear when they're about to disappoint you. Oh, honey, she said casually. That's Cole's alumni championship weekend. I blinked. I know, I answered, but we've had this venue booked for 8 months. She shrugged as though I'd mentioned the weather. Cole's game is more important. Then she said the sentence that would echo in my mind for months afterward. You'll understand someday when you have real responsibilities. Real responsibilities. As if marrying the man I loved somehow ranked below another Saturday soccer tournament. I waited for my father to say something. Anything. He was sitting in his recliner with the television playing softly in the background. He looked at me, gave me a small, uncomfortable nod, and stayed silent. That silence hurt almost as much as her words. Just as I was preparing to leave, my mother noticed the stack of invitations under my arm. Are those for the family? I nodded. There are about 40. She reached toward them. Give them to me. I'll mail them. You've got enough to worry about. For a moment, I actually felt relieved. It seemed like such a small gesture, the kind mothers make without being asked. I handed her every single envelope, 40 invitations, each one already addressed, each one stamped, each one carrying a tiny piece of my hope. I thanked her. I hugged her. Then I drove home believing that maybe, just maybe, things were finally changing. I had no idea I had just handed my mother the very tool she would use to erase my family from my wedding. The truth is, this wasn't new. It only felt new because I had spent decades explaining it away. When I finished second place in the regional spelling bee, my mother left before the awards ceremony because Cole had a soccer match across town. When I graduated nursing school, she spent most of the ceremony checking her phone for updates from another one of his games. Every milestone in my life somehow became secondary to whatever my brother happened to be doing. I kept telling myself she was busy, that parenting was hard, that she loved us both, just differently. Those stories made surviving easier, but they also gave her permission to keep hurting me. Every excuse I made became another lesson, a lesson that she could disappoint me, and I would still come back smiling. Daniel never believed those excuses. He never argued with me. He never criticized my parents. But he noticed things I refused to see. One evening, while we were finishing our seating chart, he quietly looked at the front row. Are you sure you want to leave these 4 seats empty? I smiled. They won't be empty. My parents will come. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he leaned over, kissed my forehead, and simply said, I hope you're right. He loved me enough not to destroy my hope, even when he could already see the truth. Looking back, that may have been the greatest kindness anyone ever showed me. 10 days before the wedding, my phone buzzed. The message came from my cousin, Maddie. It seemed innocent enough. Hey, I heard the wedding got postponed. Did you pick a new date yet? I stared at the screen. Postponed? What postponed? No one had postponed anything at that moment. I felt something cold settle in my stomach because deep down, for the very first time, I realized someone was telling my story without me. And I had no idea how many people had already believed. To be continued, the next phone call would expose the first crack in my mother's carefully built lie. I called Maddie before I had time to convince myself there had to be a simple explanation. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said cheerfully. Did you move the wedding to the fall? My heart dropped. What are you talking about? There was a long pause. Then her voice changed. Waverly, Aunt Maureen told everyone you postponed it. I felt my grip tighten around my phone. What exactly did she say? Maddie hesitated before answering. She said planning the wedding had become overwhelming, that you wanted something much smaller, and that you were asking the family to give you space until you announced a new date. Every word landed like another stone on my chest. None of it was true. Not one word. The wedding is still June 14th, I whispered. Same barn, same time. Nothing has changed. Silence. Then Maddie spoke again. I had no idea. Neither of us did. The moment we hung up, I called my mother. She answered with the same warm voice she always used whenever someone else might overhear. Hi, sweetheart. I didn't waste time. Mom, did you mail the invitations? There was the briefest pause, just one heartbeat. Then she laughed softly. Of course I did. Why? I just got a call from Maddie. She thinks the wedding was postponed. Another pause. Longer this time. Oh, honey, my mother sighed. You know how Brenda gets confused. I'll call her. I'll straighten everything out. Her voice was calm, gentle, completely believable. And because she was my mother, I believed her again. I wish I could tell you that something inside me finally woke up in that moment. It didn't. Not yet. Instead, I thanked her. Again. Looking back now, that hurts more than almost anything else. I kept thanking the very person who was quietly dismantling the happiest day of my life. But something still felt wrong. A feeling I couldn't explain. The same feeling I get at the hospital when a patient's numbers look normal. Yet, every instinct tells me something is dangerously off. So the next morning, I stopped waiting. If people were confused, I would call them myself. One by one. The first call was Aunt Carol. She sounded genuinely surprised to hear my voice. Waverly, I thought you wanted a private ceremony. I frowned. Who told you that? She answered without hesitation. Your mother. She said you were overwhelmed and didn't want everyone making a fuss. I swallowed hard. No, I want you there. I've always wanted you there. There was silence. Then Aunt Carol quietly said, Oh, sweetheart, I am so sorry. The second call was even worse. My cousin Jake had already booked a family vacation. Another aunt had agreed to babysit that weekend because she believed there was no wedding. Someone else had accepted extra shifts at work, Every conversation ended exactly the same way. "We thought you canceled. Your mother told us. We never knew." With every phone call, the truth became harder to ignore. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't forgetfulness. Someone had been telling the same lie over and over and over again. For the next 2 days, I called everyone. 40 relatives, 40 conversations, 40 apologies from people who suddenly realized they'd been kept away from my wedding by someone they trusted. Some changed their plans immediately. Some couldn't. Vacations had been paid for. Flights were booked. Work schedules couldn't be changed. I wasn't angry with them. How could I be? They hadn't rejected me. They'd been deceived. That realization changed something inside me. For the first time in my life, I stopped asking, "Why doesn't my family love me enough?" and started asking, "Who benefits from making sure they never get the chance?" Those are two very different questions. One blames yourself. The other starts looking for the truth. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table staring at the seating chart. The 4 chairs in the front row still had my parents' names on them. For a moment, I considered removing them, replacing them with someone who actually wanted to be there. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. Some stubborn part of me still believed my parents might surprise me. That maybe, at the last second, they'd walk through those barn doors. Hope is a strange thing. Even after being lied to, it still whispers. Maybe this time. I folded the seating chart, turned off the kitchen light, and went upstairs. I had no idea that less than 24 hours later, my mother would leave me a voicemail, one that I would save forever. One recording that would eventually destroy every lie she had spent decades building. To be continued. The voicemail she left the night before my wedding would become the evidence that changed everything forever. The morning of my wedding arrived exactly the way I'd always imagined it. Bright blue skies, warm June sunshine, a gentle breeze moving through the orchard behind the barn. It looked like the beginning of a fairy tale. But my phone told a different story. While my hairstylist pinned the last curls into place, I checked my screen one final time. No message from my mother. No call from my father. Nothing from my brother. Then I opened social media. Cole had posted a photo from his alumni soccer tournament. His cleats were already on the field. His teammates were celebrating behind him. The caption read, "Big day. Let's bring home the trophy." I stared at it for several seconds. Then I quietly locked my phone. For the first time, I accepted the truth. They weren't running late. They weren't stuck in traffic. They weren't coming. I looked into the mirror. A woman in a white dress looked back at me. She wore my grandmother's pearl necklace. Her makeup was perfect. Her smile wasn't. That's when I whispered something to my own reflection I'll never forget. You have 2 choices today. You can spend this day mourning the people who chose not to love you, or you can marry the man who already does. That single sentence changed everything. The hurt didn't disappear, but it stopped being in control. I chose joy, even if I had to carry heartbreak beside it. A few minutes later, someone knocked softly on the bridal suite door. I expected the wedding coordinator. Instead, it was Daniel's father. Richard Mercer stood there in his charcoal gray suit, holding his hat nervously in both hands. His eyes were already wet. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said quietly. I smiled. "Not at all." He hesitated before speaking again. "I know your father isn't coming." The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Richard looked down for a moment before meeting my eyes again. "If you'd allow me, I would be honored to walk you down the aisle." For a second, I couldn't speak. No one had ever offered to stand in that place before. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. I wrapped my arms around him and whispered, "I'd love that." He hugged me like I'd always belonged in his family. As the music began outside, I stood behind the barn doors, waiting for them to open. That's when I made the mistake of looking toward the ceremony. My side of the aisle came into view first. 40 white chairs, every one of them empty. Not my parents, not my brother, not my grandmother, not a single aunt, not one cousin. Just rows of silent chairs glowing in the afternoon sunlight. For one terrifying moment, I forgot how to breathe. Every nightmare I tried to ignore had become reality. The emptiness was impossible to hide. Everyone could see it. Every guest, every photographer, every stranger. They all knew the bride's family hadn't come. Then something extraordinary happened. Daniel's mother, Patricia, slowly stood up from the groom's side. She turned toward her family. She didn't whisper. She didn't ask. She simply smiled and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "We're her family too." Then she pointed toward my empty side of the aisle. "Go fill those seats." For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Then, every single member of Daniel's family stood up. His parents, his grandparents, his aunts, his uncles, his cousins, even relatives I'd only met once before. Without hesitation, they crossed the aisle together. One by one, they filled every empty chair that had been waiting for my family. The front row, the second row, the third. All 40 seats. A man I'd only spoken to twice sat in the chair reserved for my father. An elderly aunt settled into the seat marked for my mother. A little girl climbed onto her grandmother's lap where my brother should have been. Within seconds, the empty side of the wedding disappeared. Not because my family had finally arrived, but because another family refused to let me stand alone. Behind those barn doors, I completely fell apart. Tears streamed down my face. Not because of the people who abandoned me, but because of the people who didn't. For 33 years, I'd believed love had to be earned, that I had to work harder, give more, forgive more, stay quieter, become smaller, just to deserve it. Yet these people, who had known me for only 2 years, loved me without asking me to earn a single thing. That was the moment I finally understood. Real family doesn't always share your last name. Sometimes, they simply choose you. Richard gently squeezed my arm. It's time. The doors opened. And surrounded by the family that had chosen me, I took my first step toward the life I'd waited 33 years to begin. To be continued, because one wedding video, only 30 seconds long, was about to expose my mother's lies to more than 40,000 people. Daniel and I disappeared for 3 days after the wedding. No phones, no social media, no family drama. Just a quiet lakeside cabin where, for the first time in my life, I could breathe without waiting for someone to disappoint me. I thought the hardest part was behind us. I couldn't have been more wrong. When we finally drove home, my phone exploded with notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. At first, I thought someone had gotten sick. Then Daniel handed me his phone. Waverly, I think you need to see this. It was our wedding photographer's page. Sasha had posted a 30-second video from our ceremony. The video began with my side of the aisle, 40 empty white chairs. Then it showed Patricia standing and smiling. We're both sides today. The next few seconds showed Daniel's entire family crossing the aisle to sit with me. The final shot was Richard walking me down the aisle while I tried not to cry. The caption simply read, "When her family didn't show, his family became hers." The video had already been viewed more than 40,000 times. But it wasn't the views that changed everything. It was the comments. One after another, people I actually knew started writing beneath the video. Wait, that was the wedding? We were told it had been postponed. Nobody told us it was still happening. I would have been there. Every comment uncovered another piece of the same lie. For years, my mother had controlled the story by speaking to people one at a time. Now, everyone was reading everyone else's version. The truth was assembling itself without me saying a single word. Daniel looked at me quietly. They're figuring it out. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the crazy one. I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't imagining anything. The evidence was becoming public. The next morning, Patricia called. She wasn't crying. She wasn't asking questions. She was angry, not at me, at what had been done to me. "Waverly," she said firmly, 40 people don't accidentally misunderstand a wedding. Someone made sure they stayed home. I started making excuses. Maybe mom just got confused. Patricia stopped me. "No. I've raised children. This wasn't confusion. This was a decision." Her certainty shook something loose inside me. For 33 years, I'd been defending people who never defended me. That phone call changed me. Instead of asking why people kept hurting me, I finally started asking, how? The answer arrived 2 days later. My cousin Maddie knocked on our front door carrying a department store shopping bag. She didn't smile. She simply placed the bag on my kitchen counter. "I borrowed Aunt Maureen's car this morning. I found these underneath the spare tire." My hands started shaking before I even looked inside. There they were, 40 cream-colored envelopes. Every invitation I'd handed my mother weeks earlier, still sealed, still stamped, never mailed. My own handwriting stared back at me from every envelope. My grandmother's name, my aunt's, my cousin's. Every single invitation had been hidden in the trunk of my mother's car. She hadn't forgotten. She hadn't misplaced them. She had hidden them. On purpose. I picked up one envelope carefully. The stamp was already attached. That detail broke something inside me. Because people who forget don't buy stamps, don't seal envelopes, don't hide them beneath a spare tire. That wasn't neglect. That was planning. Years of excuses died in one silent moment. The nurse inside me immediately took over. I laid every envelope across my kitchen table. I called relatives again. This time I asked them to forward every text message they'd received. Within hours, the pattern became undeniable. Screenshots, timestamps, messages saying the wedding had been postponed. Messages asking relatives not to contact me because I wanted privacy. Every lie traced back to one person, my mother. I printed every message, made copies, labeled dates, built a folder exactly the way I build patient charts at work. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted the truth. There was only one person left who deserved to see it before anyone else. My father. I drove to my parents' house on a Thursday afternoon, knowing my mother would be at her gardening club. Dad opened the door looking exhausted. "I need 15 minutes, I said. "That's all." We sat together at the kitchen table where I'd eaten breakfast almost every morning growing up. Without saying a word, I placed the 40 unopened invitations in front of him, then the screenshots, then the timeline. He read every page in complete silence. Finally, he picked up one of the envelopes, turned it over, ran his thumb across the unused stamp. His shoulders slowly collapsed. His voice barely rose above a whisper. Your mother told me you wanted us at Cole's championship. She said you understood. Tears filled my eyes. I never said that. I begged her to come. Dad closed his eyes. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me with more pain than I'd ever seen in his face. Waverly, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. For the first time in my life, I believed him. Because the man sitting across from me looked just as betrayed as I felt. And neither of us realized the worst discovery was still waiting inside that house. A discovery hidden for 11 years. One that would change everything we thought we knew about my mother. My father didn't speak for several minutes. He just sat there, staring at the unopened invitations spread across the kitchen table. 40 envelopes. 40 opportunities stolen. 40 reminders that the happiest day of my life had been sabotaged by the one person who should have protected it. Then he quietly stood up. If she hid this from me, he whispered, what else has she hidden? Without another word, he walked to the hallway closet. From the highest shelf, he pulled down my mother's old keepsake box. It was the one box nobody was ever allowed to touch. Inside were baby books, family photographs, old church programs, and beneath them, a yellowed manila envelope with my name written across the front. Already opened. My father frowned. This isn't my handwriting. He handed it to me. The moment I unfolded the letter, my entire world stopped. It was dated 11 years earlier. The letter began with the words I dreamed of reading when I was 22. Congratulations. I had been accepted into one of the state's most competitive, accelerated nursing programs. A full scholarship. Every dollar paid. I never received it. For 11 years, I believed I hadn't been good enough. I worked extra jobs. I attended night classes. I buried myself in debt. I blamed myself for a rejection that had never happened. I hadn't failed. Someone had simply hidden my future. I slid down the hallway wall until I was sitting on the floor, the letter shaking in my hands. My father covered his face. I let this happen. No, I whispered through tears. She never gave either of us the chance to stop it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't grieving the mother I had. I was grieving the life I should have had. Within days, my mother realized the truth was slipping beyond her control. She called relatives. She called friends. She called anyone willing to listen. According to her, I was the ungrateful daughter, the jealous sister, the woman trying to destroy her own family. For years, that strategy had always worked. Tell the story first. Control the narrative. Make yourself the victim. But this time, there was evidence. Screenshots. 40 unopened invitations. The scholarship letter. And a voicemail she never imagined I had saved. People compared notes. The lies no longer lived in separate conversations. They were finally standing side by side. And they couldn't survive the daylight. A few weeks later came my mother's 62nd birthday. Every year she hosted a large family gathering. This year was no different. Everyone came. My father came too, although he was already living with my uncle by then. When I walked into the backyard, carrying a simple canvas tote bag, my mother smiled for the crowd. Waverly, she said sweetly, I wasn't sure you'd come after everything. I smiled back. Happy birthday, Mom. I brought something everyone should see. The conversations faded. I walked to the gift table, opened my bag, and carefully laid all 40 unopened invitations across the white tablecloth. One by one, name after name, stamp after stamp. Silence settled over the yard. Then I placed the printed text messages beside them. I don't want anyone to take my word for this, I said calmly. Please, check your own phones. One by one, heads lowered. Screens lit up. People found the same messages, the same lies, the same dates. No one looked at me. They were all looking at my mother. For the first time in her life, she couldn't control the room. She exploded. How dare you embarrass me? You've always been jealous of your brother? I did what was best for this family. Then she said the sentence every relative needed to hear. Cole's game was more important than your wedding. No one spoke. Not because they agreed, because they finally understood. Everything I had ever said was true. Then my mother made one final mistake. She looked around the yard and shouted, I never told anyone your wedding was canceled. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and quietly said, Please, don't make me play this. She folded her arms. Go ahead. So I did. Her own recorded voice filled the silent backyard. Don't expect any of us to come. I made sure of that. This family has one star, Waverly, and it was never you. When the recording ended, no one moved. No one needed an explanation. The truth had spoken for itself. My grandmother slowly stood from her chair. She looked directly at my mother. Her voice was quiet. What have you done? That was all. My father walked across the yard and stood beside me. For the first time in 33 years, he chose my side. Cole looked completely stunned. Mom, you told me the wedding was months away. I would have been there. My mother had lied to him too. She hadn't just stolen my wedding. She had stolen his chance to be my brother. People began gathering their things. No shouting, no dramatic scene, just quiet disappointment. One by one, they left. My grandmother left without hugging her daughter. My aunts apologized. My cousins hugged me. My father looked at my mother one last time. I'm filing for divorce. You lied to our daughter. You lied to me. And you stole years of her life. Then he walked away. He never moved back into that house. Months have passed. Since that day, the scholarship letter is framed in the hallway of our home. Not because I regret the path I took, but because it reminds me of one simple truth. I was always good enough. Someone else simply tried to convince me I wasn't. My relationship with my father has slowly healed. Cole and I are learning how to be brother and sister without someone standing between us. Daniel's family still calls every Sunday and every holiday. I never wonder where I'll be sitting. As for my mother, my door isn't locked, but it isn't open either. Forgiveness without accountability isn't healing. It's permission. Until she can say, I was wrong, without excuses, without blame, without rewriting history, she will remain outside that door. Not because I hate her, because I finally love myself enough to stop becoming smaller for someone else's comfort. When you have real responsibilities. As if marrying the man I loved somehow ranked below another Saturday soccer tournament. I waited for my father to say something. Anything. He was sitting in his recliner with the television playing softly in the background. He looked at me, gave me a small, uncomfortable nod, and stayed silent. That silence hurt almost as much as her words. Just as I was preparing to leave, my mother noticed the stack of invitations under my arm. Are those for the family? I nodded. There are about 40. She reached toward them. Give them to me. I'll mail them. You've got enough to worry about. For a moment, I actually felt relieved. It seemed like such a small gesture, the kind mothers make without being asked. I handed her every single envelope, 40 invitations, each one already addressed, each one stamped, each one carrying a tiny piece of my hope. I thanked her. I hugged her. Then I drove home believing that maybe, just maybe, things were finally changing. I had no idea I had just handed my mother the very tool she would use to erase my family from my wedding. The truth is, this wasn't new. It only felt new because I had spent decades explaining it away. When I finished second place in the regional spelling bee, my mother left before the awards ceremony because Cole had a soccer match across town. When I graduated nursing school, she spent most of the ceremony checking her phone for updates from another one of his games. Every milestone in my life somehow became secondary to whatever my brother happened to be doing. I kept telling myself she was busy, that parenting was hard, that she loved us both, just differently. Those stories made surviving easier, but they also gave her permission to keep hurting me. Every excuse I made became another lesson, a lesson that she could disappoint me,